My mom admitted to hating me simply because I was unplanned. She and my golden child brother scheduled a party on my wedding day. I'm 29 now, married to my amazing wife Emily, and working as a doctor, which still feels surreal to say out loud. On the surface, my life looks pretty great, and it is now, but let's just say getting here was complicated. My childhood wasn't exactly what you'd call normal, and it shaped a lot of who I am today, for better or worse. So here's the thing. I was a surprise baby. My parents didn't plan for me, and honestly, it felt like they never really wanted me. I found out years later that my mom had really bad postpartum depression after I was born, which made things even harder for her. She already had my older brother, Marcus, who's just a year older than me, and I guess the timing of my arrival just tipped everything over the edge. When I was born, my parents decided they couldn't handle 2 kids under 2, so they sent me to live with my grandparents. Looking back, I think that was probably the best thing they could have done for me. My grandparents were incredible, kind, patient, and loving in all the ways my parents weren't. They treated me like I was their whole world, and for the first 8 years of my life, I felt safe and cared for. I didn't even realize anything was missing. Well, not until my parents would visit and bring Marcus along. Every time they came to see me, it was like this weird reminder that I was different. Marcus would cling to them, and they'd shower him with affection, like he was the golden child. And then, after an hour or so, they'd pack up and leave with him. I'd stand by the door, watching them drive off, wondering why he got to go home with them while I stayed behind. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love living with my grandparents. But as a kid, it's hard not to feel like you've done something wrong when your parents keep leaving you behind. One time, I remember asking my grandma why they always took Marcus and not me. She just hugged me tight and said, "They love you in their own way, sweetheart." At the time, I clung to that answer because, well, what else could I do? But part of me couldn't help but wonder if there was something about me that made me harder to love. Anyway, things changed when I turned 8. Out of the blue, my parents decided it was time for me to move back in with them. No warning, no easing into it. They just showed up one day and said, "Pack your things, you're coming home." I remember standing there, holding my favorite stuffed animal, feeling like my whole world was being flipped upside down. My grandparents looked heartbroken, but they didn't argue. They just hugged me goodbye and told me to be a good boy. I should have been excited to finally live with my parents and my brother, right? But honestly, I was terrified, and as it turned out, I had every reason to be. Moving back in with my parents was not the fresh start I'd hoped for. The first thing they told me when we got to their house was that I'd be sharing a room with Marcus. That might sound normal for some families, but for me, it felt like being thrown into the lion's den. Marcus and I had never been close. Even as kids, he'd always been, well, kind of a jerk to me. But back then, I only saw him during those short visits. Now, I was supposed to live with him, sleep in the same room, and somehow pretend we were brothers who got along. Let's just say that didn't happen. From day one, Marcus made it his mission to make my life miserable. He'd laugh at me for the books I liked to read, call me names when I brought home good grades, and pick fights over the dumbest things, like how I made my bed the wrong way. And if I tried to stand up for myself, he'd just go harder. I remember one time I had this little model airplane I'd worked on for weeks. I was so proud of it. Marcus accidentally knocked it off the shelf and then laughed while I tried to piece it back together. The worst part? My parents didn't do anything about it. Anytime I tried to tell them what was going on, they'd brush it off with, "Oh, that's just how brothers are," or "You two need to learn to get along." I'd sit there, feeling like I was losing my mind. How is it normal for your own brother to treat you like crap every single day? And why didn't they care? One time, I thought I'd finally get a little recognition from them. It was a big deal at school. I'd won this award for a science project I'd worked my butt off on, and there was going to be a ceremony. I was so excited. I even told my parents weeks in advance so they could plan to come. But the day of the ceremony, they told me they couldn't make it. Why? Because Marcus had a swim meet. A freaking swim meet. They didn't even seem sorry about it. "We can't be in 2 places at once," my mom said, like that was supposed to make me feel better. I sat through that ceremony with my grandparents instead, trying not to cry while other kids' parents clapped and cheered for them. My grandparents did their best. They always did, but it wasn't the same. It never was. Things kept going like that throughout middle school and high school. Marcus was the loud, outgoing golden boy who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes, and I was, well, the other kid, the quiet one, the one who kept his head down and tried not to rock the boat. I threw myself into my schoolwork because, honestly, what else was I supposed to do? It was the only thing I had control over. If I worked hard enough, maybe I could prove I was worth something. By the time I got to high school, I'd pretty much given up on the idea of having a close relationship with my family. My grandparents were still my safe haven. They'd call to check on me, send me care packages, and remind me that I was loved. But at home, it was like I was invisible unless I did something wrong. Marcus would still pick on me, but by then, I'd learned to just tune him out. Survival mode, I guess. One night during my senior year, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. My dad said something about how Marcus was the athlete and I was the brain. My mom laughed and said, "Yeah, but brains don't win medals." I don't think they knew I could hear them, but that comment stuck with me. It was like a confirmation of what I'd always felt, that no matter what I did, it would never be good enough. Still, I pushed through. I got into a good college, which felt like my ticket out. When I found out I'd been accepted to med school later on, I thought, this is it. This is how I prove them wrong. Getting into med school was one of the proudest moments of my life. I'd worked so hard for it, and for once I thought maybe my parents would finally see me, really see me. I called them right after I got the acceptance email, practically buzzing with excitement. My dad's response? "Oh, that's great. Congrats, buddy." My mom? "Good for you. Marcus just landed an internship at a marketing firm. Isn't that exciting?" I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't that. I hung up the phone and just sat there, staring at the wall, wondering why I even bothered. Meanwhile, when Marcus got into an average state college a few years earlier, they threw him a whole party with balloons, cake, and a banner that said, "We're so proud of you." I couldn't even get more than a 2-minute phone call. Fast forward a few years, and I'm in med school, juggling insane hours and a mountain of stress. That's when I met Emily. She was a friend of a friend, and honestly, she walked into my life like a ray of sunshine. She saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself, and for the first time, I felt like I had someone in my corner for real. We started dating, and a couple of years later, I proposed. She said yes, and suddenly I had this little piece of happiness I could call my own. Of course, when I told my parents about the engagement, my mom's first reaction was, "Are you sure she's the right one for you?" No congratulations, no excitement, just doubt. She didn't even try to hide her disapproval. "She's nice," my mom said later, "but I always thought you'd end up with someone more ambitious." I don't even know what that was supposed to mean, but I didn't let it get to me. Emily was the best thing that had ever happened to me, and I wasn't going to let my mom ruin that. Then came the wedding. Emily and I spent months planning it, trying to make it perfect. We set the date, sent out invites, and were so excited to celebrate with our family and friends. But a couple of weeks before the big day, my mom called me. She and Marcus had decided to throw a huge anniversary party for themselves on the same day as my wedding. I don't know if it was pettiness, spite, or just plain selfishness, but they fully expected me to reschedule my wedding to accommodate them. When I told her that wasn't happening, she got defensive. "It's not a big deal," she said. "We can't please everyone." I was so angry I couldn't even think straight. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they didn't care. On my wedding day, my mom and Marcus didn't show up. My dad came for the ceremony, but left early to attend their party. I remember standing in the reception hall, looking around at all the people who were there to support us, and feeling this mix of gratitude and heartbreak. Emily held my hand and whispered, "You have your family right here," and I swear, that's when I knew I didn't need my parents or Marcus to validate me anymore. But the real turning point came a few months later. My grandparents, my rocks, my safe haven, passed away within weeks of each other. It was devastating, but they'd lived long, full lives, and I took comfort in knowing they were at peace. What I didn't expect was the bombshell they'd left in their will. They decided to leave everything to me. Not my mom, not Marcus, just me. When my mom found out, she lost it. She called me, acting all sweet and apologetic, saying how we should reconnect as a family and how she'd love to help me plan a proper wedding celebration. I wasn't stupid. I knew what she was really after. When I didn't immediately agree, she finally snapped. "Do you know how hard it was for me to have you? I never wanted another child, but your father insisted." "You ruined my life." Those words hit me like a freight train. I think part of me had always known she resented me, but hearing her say it out loud was something else entirely. I didn't even respond. I just hung up and sat there stunned. A few days later, my dad called and apologized for everything, for not standing up for me, for letting Marcus get away with so much, for being a terrible father. He sounded sincere, and maybe he was, but it didn't matter anymore. I told him I appreciated the apology, but I couldn't keep them in my life. Not him, not my mom, not Marcus. I was done. After that phone call with my dad, I made the decision to cut ties with my mom and Marcus completely. It wasn't some dramatic declaration or tearful goodbye. I just stopped answering their calls, stopped responding to texts, and blocked them on everything. For years, I'd been waiting for them to give me the love and respect I thought I deserved, but that phone call with my mom made me realize something. I didn't need their validation anymore. I'd spent my whole life chasing something they were never going to give me, and it was time to let it go. The thing is, cutting people out, even toxic people, isn't easy. There were moments when I felt guilty, like maybe I was being too harsh or ungrateful. But Emily was there to remind me that I wasn't alone. She's always been my rock, my voice of reason when I start doubting myself. She told me, "You don't owe anyone a relationship just because they're family. You get to choose who you let in." And she was right. For the first time in my life, I started thinking about what I wanted, not what other people expected from me. Emily and I decided to focus on building a new kind of family, one built on love, respect, and actual effort. We talked a lot about what kind of parents we wanted to be someday, and I promised myself that if we ever had kids, they'd never feel the way I did growing up. I want them to know they're loved, no matter what. As for my mom and Marcus, I didn't hear from them again after I blocked them, which honestly was a relief. My dad still tries to reach out every now and then, mostly around holidays or birthdays, but I keep it polite and distant. I don't hate him, but I also don't trust him. Forgiveness is one thing, but letting someone back into your life after years of neglect, that's another thing entirely. Now, years later, I finally feel like I'm in a good place. Emily and I just bought our first house, a cozy little place with a big yard where we're planning to start a garden. My career is demanding, but I love what I do, and knowing I can help people makes all the hard work worth it. And most importantly, I feel free. Free from the weight of trying to please people who never saw me for who I was. Free to define my own happiness. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that family isn't about blood. It's about the people who show up for you, who make you feel seen and valued. For me, that's Emily, a few close friends, and the memory of my grandparents who loved me when no one else did. I'll carry that love with me forever, and I'll make sure to pass it on to the family Emily and I create together.